Chapter 2. In the course of a single night, winter folded the land into its earth-numbing embrace. Snow, that silent invader, fell deep and soft upon Redwall Abbey and Mossflower Country. Abbot Humble rose early from his bed in the cellars, as he always did, no matter what the season. The old hedgehog had ruled as Father Abbot for a long time. It still bemused him that he was the one chosen by all Redwallers as their leader. Humble had been a cellar hog, born to the task with an unsurpassed knowledge of ales, wines and cordials. No beast was more surprised than he when 2 seasons after the passing of Abbess Fertila, the Council of Elders, backed by a unanimous approval, had elevated Humble to lofty position, Father Abbot of Redwall. It had taken lengthy persuasion before the modest old cellar hog accepted his new role, and, even then, only under his personal conditions. He would never forsake his beloved cellars, all those barrels and kegs and casks and firskins filled with the good beverages. Having created, nurtured and cared for them, Humble will not hear of coming to live upstairs. The saying at Redwall was, "Humble is as humble does." By choice the cellars remained his home. Old habits die hard, they say. This was clearly the case with Humble. Even to this day, his first chore on rising was to check his cellars before tending to his business as abbot. Raking out the ashes from his little forge, Humble stalked up the burning embers with judicious amounts of broken barrel staves, sea coal and charcoal. He ambled around his cellar stock, tapping, wedging and checking the barrels. Satisfied, Humble looked in on Burlup, the present cellar hog, whom he had trained up for the job. The stout young cellar hog was still sleeping peacefully in a truckle bed tucked beneath an alcove. Humble smiled as he covered Burlup's footpaws with the eiderdown. Burlup was a good beast, trustworthy, diligent, and strong as an oak. The abbot took comfort in knowing that the cellars were safe in his care. Instinct told Humble that snow had fallen outside. He took a warm homespun cloak from the peg behind the door and left to make his way upstairs. Friar Gleeson was another early riser. The fat dormouse looked up from his work as the abbot entered the kitchens. He waved a flowery paw. "Good morning, Father. Snow's thick on the ground outside." Humble returned the greeting as he stirred a cauldron of steaming oatmeal and began ladling out 2 bowlfuls. "Morning, Glees. I'll take a spot of breakfast up the east night wash, with your permission." The friar spooned honey over 1 bowl for Humble. He gave the other bowl a generous dash of hot root pepper from a gourd shaker, murmuring half to himself, "Carry on by all means, Abbot. I've put hot root on Skipper's oatmeal. He sprinkles it on everything. Oh, wait a moment. I'll add some nutmeg to it." He grated the sweet, pungent spice over the bowl and stirred it in, winking mischievously. "There, that'll keep the plank-ruddered rogue guessing." Humble left the kitchens, carrying a tray loaded with both oatmeal bowls, a small basket of hot hazelnut toast, and 2 beakers of steaming coltsfoot and comfrey tea. It was snowing heavily and still dark outdoors. Humble's sandalled paw printed tracks into the pristine surface of the white carpet as he rounded the south gable. Chuckling, he recalled his Dibbon days. Dibbon is the name conferred upon all Abbey babes. He remembered dashing out into the first snow, along with his little pals, to see who could make the first paw prints. On top of the east wall's broad ramparts, Skipper of Otters stood cloaked, warming his paws at a fire in a strapped-iron brazier. Turning, he spotted the figure with the tray, illuminated in a shaft of golden light from one of the rear Abbey windows. Blowing snowflakes from his lips, the burly otter shouted, "Ahoy! Who goes there? Friend for food!" Abbot Humble's cheery reply rang back at him. "'Tis a friend and bearing breakfast. Permission to come up." Skipper stamped his paws, chortling happily. "Come on aboard, matey, before I perish from hunger." Bounding down the wall steps, he took the tray from Humble, cautioning him, "Mind your step, Father. 'Tis slippery underpaw." The 2 friends stood on the ramparts of the abbey, facing the snow-wreathed trees of Mossflower Wood. They warmed their backs on the fire and took breakfast together, watching the rising sun make scarlet flame patterns through the leafless branches. Skipper spooned oatmeal down at an alarming rate, nodding towards the rising light. "Here comes the good old sun. What we do without him? Something in this oatmeal aside from hot root. An odd taste. Wonder what it is." The abbot could not resist telling him. Frankly, some said you wouldn't guess. Actually, it's nutmeg. Skipper wolfed it energetically. Very nice, I like it. The rising sun came out swiftly, bearded in a pinky fawn cloud. It shone like a ruby dipped in molten gold. Skipper paused. Mother Nature's miracle, ain't it a pretty sight? Shielding his bow from the whirling snowflakes, the abbot turned his gaze upon the beautiful abbey. He shook his head in wonder. Redwall takes on a different face each season, my friend. See how the light catches the stones. They both stood silent, viewing the ancient building through the falling snow. In the newborn day, its normally dusty red sandstone was turned to a pale roseate hue, reflecting sunlight from the bell tower to the weather vane. Buttresses and arches stood out in deeper shaded relief. Rear dormitory and hall windows blazed light from the risen orb of the sun, causing snow-laden windowsills to twinkle like powdered silver. Beyond the south lawns and the orchard, Redwall Abbey's pond was smooth under a thick sheet of ice. The entire scene was bordered by the walkways and battlements of the abbey's broad outer walls. Skipper placed a paw on his friend's shoulder, smiling. Aye, mate, it's a wonder to behold. I think you're the great Father Rabbit over it all. Humble blinked and put aside his paw. Then he and Skipper began taking a leisurely stroll around to the west wall and the main gate. I was quite happy as a cellar hog, you know. Chuckling, the burly otter replied, And so you still are, but you are the best beast for the job and you deserve it. When they reached the southwest walkway, a cry rang out from the path beyond the outer wall. Any breakfast to be had for two poor beasts to wander and pull loose in the freezing weather? Abbot Humble beamed from ear to spike tip. Cousin Jem, I'd know that voice anywhere. Sheltering their eyes, they peered down to the path. Two aged creatures towing a small cart were trudging up from the south, the tracks behind them being obliterated by the downfall of white. One was a hedgehog, the other a mole, both cloaked and hooded. Tipping his snout politely, the mole grinned up at them. He roared up in a deep bass voice, speaking in the quaint mole accent. I beg ye pardon, sirs, but bees you going to leave us out here till we both are turned into snow beasts? Skipper leaned out over the battlements. Well, scuttle me rudder, 'tis of the yon Jem and a wandering Walt. Where have you two old relics been for the last 8 seasons? We give up over seeing you again. Hither yon Jem, the hedgehog waved a mittened paw. Good winter tide to you, cousin Humble, and to you, Skipper. We ain't saying another word until we're through your gates and eating good victuals in front of the blazing fire. So look lively and let us in, you old stray whomper. Skipper led Humble through the west rampart and down the wall stairs. They both banged on the gatehouse door. Still clad in nightshirt and bedcap, Brother Gordale, the mouse gatekeeper, shuffled out, yawning and scratching. Brother Snow, what's all the kerfuffle about? 'Tis scarcely daybreak. Can't you sleep? Skipper began unbarring the main gates. Visitors, matey, lend a power here, we got guests. Snow was drifting against the bottom of the heavy oaken gates, making a crunching sound as the Redwallers tugged them open. The two visitors trundled their coat inside, then helped to close the gates and bar them. Simultaneously, the main door of the Abbey building burst open. A horde of cheering, squealing Dibbons stampeded out, roaring with delight at the sight of snow, a first experience for some of them. Within moments, the Abbey grounds were a scene of chaos. Abbot Humble raised his eyes resignedly to the sky. Oh, dearie me, let's get indoors quickly. Ducking snowballs and avoiding sliding little ones, they made their way through the melee. Older Redwallers stood in the doorway holding mufflers, mittens, scarves and hoods. Their entreaties were lost on the wild herd of Dibbons. Come back here and get dressed properly. You'll be snuffling with cold if you don't put decent winter clothes on. You come back here this very instant, you rascals. Put snowballs down, please. Don't you dare. Volleys of snowballs were hurled by the rebellious pack of Abbey babes. Trying to get inside the building, the abbot and his friends were caught on the front steps with the Dibbon minders. Every beast came in for a good pelting. Humble faced the little ones, paws open wide. Now stop this, please. I command you to... A well-aimed snowball caught him on the snout. More snowballs spattered across Skipper's back as he rescued the abbot and pushed him inside. Still throwing, the Dibbons retreated in the direction of the pond, intent on trying out the ice. Skipper called to one of his otter crew. Follow those villains, mate. Make sure none of them goes through the ice. Gordale slammed the Abbey door shut as a barrage of snowballs burst against it. He brushed snow from his nightshirt indignantly. Hooligans! Rogues! Manners are young uns these days, really! Shaking snow from his habit sleeves, Humble chuckled at the old Abbey gatekeeper. Forgotten your dipping seasons, brother? Jem pulled Snore from his head spikes. Aye, let the babes have their fun. Right, leave me to those kitchens as the abbot's cousin. I demand it. Walt was fully in agreement. Bray, oh, let I toast my paws, boys, stove and get some brackets in the old stomach. Friar Gleeson put aside his ladle and shook the travellers' paws cordially. And no weary travellers, come in and let me feed your bodies and warm your hearts. My kitchens are at your disposal. Walt winked at Jem. Boy, Yogi, there's me's a creature I could dearly admire. Gleeson seated them on a heap of dry sacks. They gasped with pleasure as the friar opened his big oven, gesturing with a long paddle. Mushroom pasties with hot gravy, like and carrot bake topped with yellow cheese, or maybe some fresh baked crusty wheat bread. Merely heat up some of that harvest vegetable soup we had for supper last night, as a good little maid. A tubby little mole maid in frilly apron and mob cap curtsied. Zoopy's coming right away, sirs. Skipper gaped in awe as the guests shed their travelling gear and fell upon the food hungrily. Great season, said. A good job there's only 2 you, mate. How many famines have you lived through? Jem looked up from his second pasty. Too many, mate. We've done naught but dream of Redwall grub for 8 seasons. Walt grabbed a crusty loaf. After tearing it apart, he began dunking it in the savoury onion gravy. Ogre Abbey Vickles. Virtually no conversation ensued as Hilarion, Jem and wandering Walt applied themselves wholeheartedly to the good fare provided by Friar Gleeson and his kitchen staff. Abbot Humble and the others knew they would have to wait for news of the comings and goings in other places until both guests had taken their fill. It had been a long time since the travellers' last visit, and the Abbey creatures were anxious to hear the news from places far beyond Redwall. As the kitchens would be busy with mealtimes, Humble ordered the fire to be banked up in Cavern Hall and 2 comfortable armchairs moved close to the hearth. His guests could rest there and talk in relative comfort and peace. Much later in the morning, Jem and Walt vacated the kitchens. As they made their way across Great Hall, the main door opened. The Dibbons finally had been rounded up and were being marched in for a very late breakfast. Sister Armel, the pretty young squirrel who was infirmary keeper, led the way. She was accompanied by her 2 helpers, Formal Buffy and Sister Screeve, the stout, cheery mouse who was Abbey Recorder. All 3 were trying to gain some semblance of order amid the excited little ones. Wipe those paws thoroughly on the mat, please. Stand in line. Sister Armel eyed a tubby mouse babe sternly. Mimsy, please take that snowball outside and throw it away. Mimsy waved cheerily to Humble. Good morning, Abbot. We're just going to throw this snowball away. Abbot Humble nodded understandingly. There's a good little maid. It's not nice to take snowballs into breakfast. Mudge the Mole Babe called out helpfully. 'Cause snowy balls can't eat breakfast, can I, sir? A hedgehog Dibbon named Perkle piped up. And his sickles can not eat breakfast neither, can they? Mudge shook his head solemnly. No, they even can't, you good pudding-headed child. Sister Screeve retrieved a long pointed icicle from Perkle. Give me that icicle before you put some beast's eye out with it. Skipper laughed at the antics of the Dibbons, who, now that they remembered they were hungry, were anxious to be fed. They squeaked and bounced up and down as the helpers tried to keep them in line. They splashed about in puddles of melted snow which dripped from them. The Otter Chieftain called to the helpers. Sister Armnell, when you get that lot breakfast, maybe you Informal and Screeve might like to drop by Cavern Hall to get the latest news from Jem and Walt. Sister Screeve chivied 3 latecomers into line. Thank you. I'll bring quill and parchment to record any important events. We'll see you down there shortly.